Good morning. My name's Darren, and today I am here to talk to you about rest. Anyone need this one? I thought maybe this morning we should start by having a little rest. So I want you to close your eyes, put anything you're holding down apart from children. Put your feet on the ground and put your hands maybe somewhere on your lap. And just be aware of how your body is feeling. Are you holding tension anywhere? Maybe you need to roll your shoulders or unclench your hands or stretch your calves a little. Stretch your neck. Try and release the tension. And then just take a moment to slow your breathing down. And the best way to do this is to take a deep breath, slow, deep breath in, and to hold it, and to let it out. And do that one more time. Big, deep breath in, deeper this time, and let it out. And one last time, deeper, fill your lungs and let it out. You can open your eyes. This room feels a bit different now. What you just did then has a tangible impact upon your body. Your pulse slowed down in the last 30 seconds. That's good for your cardiovascular health. Your lungs filled perhaps further than they'd filled for a little while just then. That's good for your respiratory system. There's now more oxygen flowing around in your body. Your cortisol levels are down. Your mind is impacted as well. It has an impact upon your mood. And also, in a very useful thing, it helps you to focus and pay attention, which is good, because I've got a lot to say this morning. You're going to need it. We know that rest is an important thing. Science tells us this. There's been many studies done into sleep and more recently into waking rest and the impact that that has on our bodies and our minds. And I want to also put forward this morning that I actually think rest is good for our spiritual health as well. It's a biblical thing, that it's a sign of spiritual health, and we're going to unpack that a little bit this morning. Now, I don't need to convince you this morning that rest is important and that we need it. It's permeating all the conversations I have. I'm so tired. I'm so busy. Life's so full. I never stop. I'm looking forward to that vacation. We talk about it all the time, and people are searching for information on how to sleep better and how to rest better. We live in a world that is restless. We can flip the slides. I'm disconnected for some reason. We live in a world that where people are looking for information about rest. This is a chart from 2004 to now of people searching for the word tired on Google. It's gone up 3 times over, and it's not just how many more people are online now. That takes into account that. And the search terms, I'm not sure that any of us can probably read that, but the number 1 search term is "I'm so tired." Number 2 is "I'm tired." Why do I feel tired? Too tired. Tired meaning, wake up tired, tired after eating. Tired quotes, tired memes. I'm so tired, feeling tired all the time, no energy, tired, dizzy and tired, tired dog. Feel tired all the time. People are tired. We can overlay the word rest onto this, and it's gone up in a similar sort of number. And then over the top we can put sleep, and sleep is being searched for even more. This is what people are searching Google for. These are some of the terms. Can we go back to the search terms? Or maybe it's not there, but it basically says, I need sleep, or sleep melatonin, or sleep magnesium, all these terms to do with sleep. So people are searching the internet for sleep. So why is it that we're so tired? Why is it that we are so restless? I can look back on my life and I can think of numerous times in my life where I was very tired. I know I used to sit in the back corner over there with 3 children under the age of 5. And that was a period of my life where I felt incredibly tired. Putting kids to sleep at 3 a.m, feeding them at 3, that cycle of having small children makes you tired. And there's been plenty of other times in my life where I felt tired as well. Sometimes it's because we're working too hard. Linda did a great sermon last week on work. Work's a gift from God, but we get out of balance sometimes with our work. And for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's because we have to. It's not something that we really have much control over. The cost of living's going up. People are taking on second jobs or working overtime. So sometimes we're out of balance because we have to do it. But other times it's because we fear of missing out. We see what everyone else has got and we want all the things. And the way we get all the things is to work more. Sometimes it's because our self-worth is tied to our work. And we become addicted to work because it actually is where we get our identity from. Linda talked about that last week. And sometimes it's just because we feel the need to be productive. It's a message that we hear constantly from our world. Be productive, multitask, get more done. Sometimes we are restless because we just don't stop. I talked to a guy recently who had a year of annual leave owing to him. That's a lot of not stopping. And this is something that is in our society all the time. And it's not just because we don't take leave, it's because life is so busy and so fast. The stage of life I'm in at the moment isn't little kids, it's big kids who don't drive yet. And they want to be here and there and everywhere. Most of my kids' friends are living in Warrandyte or Eltham or Kangaroo Grounds. Crazy the amount of kilometres that we do ferrying them around, and we don't stop. Another reason I don't stop is because I've got this thing, and when I actually do sit down and think I'm resting, what am I actually doing? I'm scrolling. And that's not stopping because it's stimulus coming in. It's our minds are alert. We don't actually stop. I remember when I was 16 years old, I didn't have a phone in my pocket. I used to climb trees. I used to just sit at the top of trees for no reason whatsoever, but just because I wanted to be up this tree. I would sit up there for hours. I don't know the last time I stopped like that. In fact, what we did before for 30 seconds is maybe the first time that some of us have stopped all week. As I said, sometimes we are restless because of our circumstance, whether we're young families or older kids. Maybe we've been moving house. Maybe it's the death of a loved one that can make us tired, the grief. Sometimes it's to do with our mental health. There have been times in my life in the last 10 years where I just couldn't get out of bed because I was so tired. Sometimes it's our physical health ailing. Or maybe it's even our age. As we get older, we get tired. And so there's a variety of reasons why we get tired. And the science is clear, we need to rest, and it's good for us, but what does the Bible say about that? As Linda said before, there's a lot we could talk about this morning, and we can't get through all of it, so we're just going to pull out a few themes. The first one we see in the first chapters of the Bible, in the second chapter of Genesis, a story we've been reading. We actually find a beautiful picture of God at rest. It's actually quite a profound picture if we really lean into it. This is the story. So God, the creation of the heavens and the earth and everything in them was completed. On the seventh day, God had finished his work of creation, so he rested from all his work. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy because it was the day when he rested from all his work of creation. Beautiful picture of God resting. But I don't know if you've ever wondered why God rested. I mean, this is God, all-powerful, of infinite resource, certainly someone who doesn't get tired, but why did he actually rest? Theologians have debated this, as theologians do, and there's a variety of things. Some say it's because he finished what he was doing, which kind of makes sense. The word in Hebrew is Sabbath, which means stops or ceases. So they say that this is a significant time because he'd finished, he'd completed his creation. Others say it's actually a little bit more than that. It's the pause between activities, and that God moved from one phase into another. There's a transition happening here, and they've written a lot about what the meaning is in that. Others say it was like an artist who puts the finishing touches on their art and then steps back and enjoys their work, admires it, marvels at it. And I think there's some truth in that, because we see in each of the days of creation, the creation described as good. I think God probably lent into that goodness and enjoyed it. But then most theologians also agree that what God was doing here is actually setting, can you go back a couple of slides, sorry? Setting a pattern for us, in that he had this pattern of work for 6 days, rest for 1. And that he breathed this pattern into creation at that moment. Not just for us as humans, but for all of creation. There are times to be productive, there's times to be fruitful, and there's times to rest and to be regenerated, to be recreated. And so we see this idea of Sabbath for the first time in the Bible. It's not called Sabbath in Genesis at all. We don't see Adam and Eve practicing it. We don't see Cain and Abel or Noah or any of the characters in Genesis practicing Sabbath. It's actually introduced to us in Exodus chapter 16 for the first time. Just a chapter after the passage that Linda read to us before. And it's an interesting time in the life of the people of God, because they've just come out of Egypt. So they've just been in Egypt where they've been slaves. Exodus says that they were under the yoke of the Egyptians, that they were treated ruthlessly by the Egyptians and put to work. They had no rest in Egypt. And so we find the Israelites going into the desert in chapter 16, and they begin to wander around the desert for the first time, free from slavery. And there they are in the desert. The chapter that Linda read to us before is a great passage, because in that passage they're singing a song of praise. The euphoria of being free is there. But just one chapter later, in chapter 16, we actually see them complaining because they're hungry. For 3 weeks they've been wandering around in the desert without food. It took them 4 days to find water. And so they're hungry and they're complaining to Moses. And God says to them, I'm going to provide food for you. And he does it in a miraculous way. He says, every night you're going to have quail delivered. It's like Uber Eats from heaven. Quail will be delivered to you. And every night quail comes. And then every morning you're going to wake up and there's going to be another delivery. It's going to be bread, manna. And you'll go out and collect it. Go out and collect enough food for the day and eat and enjoy it. And so for 6 days they go out, and on the 6th day God says to them, go out and collect twice as much today, because tomorrow you're going to rest. You're going to have Sabbath, and the day is called a holy day, a day for the Lord. And this is the first time we see this pattern enacted in Scripture. What a gift this was to a people who just 3 weeks before had been under the yoke of the Egyptians, treated ruthlessly, worked around the clock. A people who were no doubt tired from that slavery and tired from wandering around the desert. God gives them this gift, the perfect time for it. But it was also a gift that they had to learn to trust in as well. And we actually see on the seventh day, some actually go out and look for food. It wasn't there. They hadn't quite worked out that God would provide enough for them on the sixth day. And they had to learn to get into this pattern of resting. So the Sabbath is introduced in chapter 16, and then in chapter 20 we see it becomes a part of the 10 Commandments. Of all the commandments, this is the longest one. So God dedicates some time in the 10 Commandments to rest. And it reads this way: "Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labour and do all your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, your son or your daughter, nor your male and female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed that Sabbath day and made it holy." So here we see the Sabbath formalized. It becomes a part of the covenant, the agreement between God and his people. Right at the heart of what he wanted them, how he wanted them to live, is this idea of rest. And it's not just a rest for them as the people of God, God's special people. It's for their animals, it's for their servants, it's for foreigners, it's for all. It extends beyond those who need the rest in their eyes, but everyone. This is actually an issue of justice. It's very hard to exploit someone when they have to rest. This is God saying all are important. This is about human dignity. This is about justice. It's also about worship. It's also about stopping and resting. In a couple of chapters later, 3 chapters later, we actually see the idea extended even further. And it gets extended into the way that they looked after their land. They were to farm their land for 6 years, and then on the 7th year, they weren't to plant anything or harvest anything. Again, this is something they had to really trust God on. Sabbath isn't always easy. I can imagine them thinking on that 7th year, how am I going to eat? But trusting that God wants them and their land even to rest. And we see it extended even further in the year of Jubilee, which is talked about in Leviticus. And the year of Jubilee, every 50 years, they're to let their land rest, but also they are to forgive debts, they're to set slaves free. It's a year of stopping, of ceasing and resetting of the whole of that culture. It's an incredible concept. So at the heart of God's agreement with his people is this idea of rest. The Sabbath is a divine commandment to his people. It's rooted in justice and mercy. It creates a rhythm of rest for people, but also creation. It creates a rhythm for worship. It's a mark of God's people. This actually is something that was quite unique to them. The people groups around them didn't do this. This is a distinguishing mark of the people of God, that they rest. And it's a sign of spiritual health. As we see right throughout the Old Testament, we see the people of Israel come close to God and then move away from God. Sabbath is almost always mentioned as something they either keep or they don't keep. It becomes a sign of their health as a nation. So this idea of Sabbath is an important one for us to grapple with. I love Tim Keller's quote here: "Keeping the Sabbath is a declaration of our freedom." It means that you are not a slave, not to your culture's expectations, your family's hopes, or even your medical school's demands, not even to your own insecurities. Have you ever felt like a slave to something? Maybe Sabbath is something to lean into and to build into your life. Another theme that we see in the Old Testament and New is that God is a source of rest. And we could do a whole sermon on this one today, but I'll just read you 2 short passages. Psalm 23, a beautiful psalm of rest. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. Beautiful picture of rest. And then one of my favourite passages in Scripture is Isaiah 40. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. And we could go on and on and on. The Psalms are full of these types of verses. It's in a lot of the writings of the prophets, Isaiah and Jeremiah. We see it time and time again. God is a place of refuge and rest, the source of it. And this theme also continues into the New Testament. Speaking of which, let's talk about Jesus and rest. I think the first thing that I'd say about Jesus in rest is that he's someone who knew what it is to be tired. We actually know that he was a carpenter before his ministry in a hot climate doing manual labour. Obviously, in that space, he would have known what it was to be tired. He was someone who travelled extensively, and he didn't have a horse and a cart. He didn't have people carrying him around. He walked from village to village. We see in John 4 verse 6 that he is tired one day. He's been walking around and he comes to a well and he sits down, and it says he was tired. This is the time he encountered the Samaritan woman. He was constantly surrounded by people. As an introvert, I read the Gospels and I get tired just looking at what he had to go through. The thousands of people that followed him around and even anticipated where he would be next. And they weren't just passively following him around, they were in his face. They were bringing people to him to be healed. They were confronting him at times. They were attacking him at times. He had people who were working against him. And then there were his disciples, people who he obviously had affection for, but boy, were they annoying at times. They didn't get what he was on about. He must have been really tired from the people interaction. Here's Jesus, who knew what it meant to be tired, and he has a rhythm of rest. And you read through Mark or any of the Gospels really, you see him withdrawing time and time again to quiet places, sometimes alone, sometimes with his disciples. We see him going up mountains to pray. We see him going into the wilderness to pray at the start of his ministry. Time and time again, he has times of rest, even to the point where he sits in a boat in the middle of a lake, a storm raging around him, and we have this beautiful picture of him asleep. Must have been tired. I can relate to that. I've had a busy week, but that's on a whole other level, that he's able to sleep in the midst of this storm. And even in the night that he was betrayed, we see after the meal that we're going to celebrate in a moment, he goes into a garden to pray and to be alone with the Father. He has this rhythm of rest. We don't know what the rhythm was. We don't know exactly how he did it, but it was a part of the way he lived his life. And it was there in his teaching as well. Jesus taught about the Sabbath. He didn't say the Sabbath is no more. He actually pushed back on the rules and the regulations of the Sabbath that the Pharisees had. The Pharisees had made the Sabbath a burden for people, the exact opposite of what it was meant to be. And Jesus pushed back on all these rules and regulations, the minutiae of these rules. They had 39 different types of work you couldn't do on the Sabbath, and they enforced them. It had become a burden for people. And Jesus said, no, the Sabbath's something else. It's meant to rejuvenate us. It's meant to help us. The Sabbath was created for us, not us for the Sabbath. We don't need to be slaves to the Sabbath. It's actually about freedom. It's about a different kind of thing. And so he pushes back on the Sabbath. And he teaches about praying in private, spending that secret time with God, which I think is part of rest. He also has this beautiful invitation, and this is where I want us to just spend a moment just pondering on this beautiful passage. This is one of the most beautiful invitations in the whole of the Bible. And as I was praying this morning, I had a sense that this is actually an invitation for us today. And so I want to put you on the other side of these words. I want you to imagine Jesus saying them to you. Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Are you tired today? Are you weary? Do you have a burden? He says, come close. Come to me and I'll give you rest. And then he says something kind of a little bit counterintuitive in some ways. He says, come to me and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Where have we heard that word this morning? Yoke. It was used to describe how the Egyptians treated the Israelites. They had the yoke of slavery on them. A yoke is an implement that we put on the back of an animal, a working animal, to make them work. And yet here Jesus is saying, come to me and I'll give you rest. But take this yoke as well. It seems a little bit strange. What is he saying there? It says, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. This seems to be a verse that has come up again and again in my reading this year. Almost every author I've read this year has talked about this verse in different ways. And the thing that has really become clear to me here is that a yoke is an implement that ties two animals together so that they can work. And I think what Jesus is saying here is, come close to me. And he's not saying, I'm going to put a yoke on you that I'm not willing to have. He's saying, let's share this yoke together. We're going to share this way. I don't know if you've ever been yoked to someone before. The closest I can come up with is a three-legged race, where you are tied to another human being and then told to run, which is stupid. But you very quickly learn that you need to work together and you need to find a pattern for running. And I think what Jesus is actually saying here is, I want you to come so close to me that you're going to begin to see the patterns of my life. You're going to see my way. And my way is different from the way of our world. My way is a way of freedom. It's a way of letting go. Remember, just in our Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, don't store up for yourselves treasures here on earth. It's a way of letting go of the expectations and the rhythms of our world and finding a new rhythm. And when we find this new rhythm, we find life. We find freedom. So Jesus here is saying, come close if you're tired, and I'm going to show you a new rhythm. I'm going to show you a new pattern. You're going to start to see life my way. And when you walk closely with me, you're going to find freedom and life and rest as a result of that. I love the way Eugene Peterson puts it. He says, are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll receive your life. I'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. The unforced rhythms of grace. You're going to learn these rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. I think this is what rest really means. So what are we to do with all these ideas of rest? I want to just suggest 2 books that you can go away and read. And this might sound like, oh no, books. One of them you can do as a video, okay? So there's an option there for you. It's quite a restful experience. And these two books I've read over the last few weeks, and they've really helped me to unpack what rest might look like in my life. And boy, do I need rest in my life at the moment. This is such an ironic week that I'm preaching on this topic. It's been one of the busiest weeks of my year. And so this has really been encouraging to me. The first one is a book called Sacred Rest. It's by a doctor, Dr. Saundra Dalton-Smith, a Christian doctor. You may have heard her recently. She's been on a lot of podcasts. She was on the Mamma Mia podcast recently, which is quite interesting. Mamma Mia interviewing a Christian author about rest. Fascinating conversation. It came out in 2019, and in this book she talks about 7 types of rest, which I found really helpful. It's a framework for thinking about why you might be tired, and she actually encourages us to do a rest audit on our life. Because rest doesn't just equal sleep, and this is a misconception that she talks about in the book. She says there's lots of different reasons you might be tired because you expend energy in different ways. These are the 7 types of rest she talks about. Physical rest, this is where we sleep, or we might get a massage, or we might do some stretching. These things renew us physically. There's mental rest, where we might create quiet spaces after a busy day of thinking. There's emotional rest, because our emotions run all day, and we need to take breaks from that. We need to learn strategies to stop and to resist some of those emotions and what's going on inside of us. There's spiritual rest, and interesting that Mamma Mia would have her on to talk about spiritual rest, but she did. And this will depend on the different tradition that you're in, but she talks about her tradition of prayer. There's social rest, because people make you tired, introverts particularly. There are people in our lives who take more than they give, and so she talks about how we need to find people that can give as well as take. There's sensory rest, and this is brilliant for our society because, as I said before, we scroll, and when we scroll, we're still getting input. We need to learn to stop. And then she talks about creative rest, and this is where we rest by appreciating the creativity of others or creation, or we rest when we create as well. And I know I can see a couple of artists in the room who I suspect probably know the energy that comes from that process of creation. I found this really helpful, might be a good resource for you. And the other one is a book that Tim threw at me on Wednesday. In the middle of my crazy sermon preparation, I said, my initial thought was, I actually said to him, no, I don't need another book. But for some reason I took it, and it's such a good read. It's by John Mark Comer, and it's a more recent book. And it's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And he talks about the epidemic of hurry in our world at the moment. And it comes out of a conversation that one of his friends had with Dallas Willard, who's an amazing Christian author. And Dallas Willard and his friend were having a chat one day, and his friend said to Dallas, "What do I need to do to become spiritually healthy?" And Dallas Willard said, "You need to ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life." And his friend wrote that down, and he looked up and said, "That was a good one, Dallas. What else?" And Dallas said, "There's nothing else." I think that's an incredibly profound statement. If you know anything about Dallas Willard, he has written book after book after book. And he's most well known for a book about spiritual disciplines, where he lists off lots of different spiritual disciplines. I think what he's saying there is, if you don't eliminate hurry from your life, all of that other stuff I've written, it will take no root in your life. It will have no effect in your life. You need to eliminate hurry. I read that and I was like, whoa. Because I spent a lot of time on my disciplines and all those types of things, but they really don't take root in my life unless I stop and I create stillness in my life. and I slow the pace of my life down. And this is the book that emerged from that conversation. And the thing I love about this book is that John Mark Comer gives you 4 practices to put into your life. And I'll quickly whip through them. The first practice is silence and solitude, an incredibly countercultural thing in our noisy world where we are always being connected. Second practice is Sabbath. And he talks about putting a whole day aside for Sabbath. Again, something that's incredibly countercultural for our world. These things are not easy. They're not just quick fixes. Third practice is simplicity. Eliminating clutter from your life. Again, very countercultural, although Marie Kondo probably is on to this one. But it's also about reducing possessions, but also reducing the clutter in your schedule and the clutter in your mind. And then the last one is slowing. And slowing is about intentionally slowing the pace of your life down. Again, really countercultural. These things aren't easy fixes, but they are so important. If you want to read this book, you can get this book probably at Coorong. There's also a great video resource. We as a church have signed up for Right Now Media. The link's on the screen there. You can get a free account there. And there's 5 videos that walk you through that book. They don't have everything in the book, but they're a good starting place, and they'd be a great thing for a small group to work through as well. I just want to finish by coming back to this beautiful invitation of Jesus. And as I said, I felt this is a word for us today. And I really want you to, as we come to the table, to perhaps take this as the invitation as you come to the table. It struck me this morning that today, as we celebrate communion, we take bread and we take juice, bread and wine. And they are to represent and remind us of Jesus' body and blood shed for us so that we may have rest. But even in those elements, we see rest. Good bread needs to rest. Even wine, for good wine to become wine, rest is a part of the process. And so this morning, come and remember his body and his blood, but also see this as an invitation to receive his rest. Wonder if the band might want to come and just want to lead us in a prayer. Heavenly Father, we come before you this morning as a people who are so often weary and tired. Gently, with your guiding hand, lead us away from the hurry and the noise and to a place where still waters flow and where we may find rest. God, I pray that this week you would teach us to breathe deeply in the quiet of your presence, to find a peace that lingers beneath the surface of life's demands. Let your peace, like a river, wash over our restless hearts and renew us with each breath we take. And this morning, as we come to the elements, we want to draw close to you, and we want to lay down our burdens and our weariness. And we want to hold on to that promise that when we do that, we'll find rest. Help us to trust the rhythm of your grace and to find rest not only in our bodies and our minds, but our spirits also. We thank you, God, for being our refuge. We thank you for offering us peace, a peace that goes beyond our understanding. And we pray that you would guide us and help us to truly understand what it means to be still and know that you are God. This morning, you're going to be invited row by row to come and to take communion. As Linda said before, all are welcome to do this. If you want to come close to Jesus this morning, whether this is your first time or you've been here for years, Come and take the elements and receive rest.